The autumn sun had just begun to dip behind the towering stone monuments of Washington, D.C., its last golden rays casting long shadows across the marble floor of Arlington National Cemetery. The air carried with it a chilling silence, broken only by the measured clicks of a soldier's boots striking the ground in perfect rhythm. He was a tomb guard, one of the select few entrusted with guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier, a sacred duty that demanded absolute discipline, unshakable devotion, and an iron will that could not be bent by storms, politics, or the presence of powerful men. Crowds gathered at the plaza to witness the precise ceremony, where time itself seemed to pause in honor of the nameless warriors who had given everything for freedom. Among the spectators was a delegation that stirred murmurs and whispers: President Vladimir Putin himself, flanked by a line of stern-faced Russian officials, security personnel, and journalists eager to capture the rare sight. His presence was not officially scheduled, but his arrival was deliberate, his sharp eyes sweeping the plaza as though he carried the weight of both history and defiance. People leaned forward, sensing something unusual, something brewing beneath the stillness of this hallowed ground, as the guard's rifle gleamed under the fading light, his steps unfaltering, his posture carved from stone itself. Putin, known worldwide for his calculated gestures and cold authority, watched the guard with an intensity that unsettled the onlookers. He whispered something to one of his aides, who gave a quick nod before gesturing toward the guard. The air thickened as anticipation swept through the plaza. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, Putin himself stepped forward, crossing into a zone few dared to intrude upon. His polished shoes echoed loudly against the stone, disturbing the rhythm of the march, drawing gasps from the crowd. With his presence alone, he had broken an invisible boundary, and eyes widened as he raised his hand in a commanding motion. His words, translated through a stern interpreter, cut through the solemn silence like a blade: move aside. The command was simple, sharp, and dripping with the weight of power. Yet it was a direct challenge to the centuries-old creed of the tomb guard, who swore never to yield their post, not to storms, not to kings, not to presidents, not even to death itself. For a brief second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked, security tensed, and all eyes locked on the solitary soldier standing at his post, whose shadow stretched long across the marble as if time itself waited for his answer. The guard did not blink, did not falter, did not so much as shift his gaze. His eyes, hidden under the shadow of his brimmed cap, were fixed forward, unyielding as granite. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Putin's face tightened, his brows furrowing as if he expected obedience, as if his voice carried the same authority here as it did in Moscow. But the plaza was not his stage, and the soldier before him was not a man swayed by politics or power. He was bound by something deeper, an oath written not on paper but carved into his very soul the day he first took up his sacred duty. The crowd's whispers rose into anxious murmurs: what would happen if the guard obeyed? What if he resisted? The guard's gloved hands tightened ever so slightly on the rifle he carried, its polished steel catching the last glint of twilight. Every second dragged into eternity. Finally, the guard's voice emerged, low yet commanding, steady yet thunderous in its simplicity: "Sir, with all due respect, I cannot move." The words reverberated through the plaza, cutting through the air more powerfully than any weapon, freezing even the boldest of breaths. The effect was immediate. The plaza stilled as if a spell had been cast. Putin's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of disbelief and indignation. No one had ever dared to contradict him so publicly, not heads of state, not generals, not ministers, yet here was a solitary soldier, refusing him with unshakable conviction. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't defiance for its own sake. It was duty, pure and unbreakable, carried out in the face of any pressure. The spectators felt the weight of the moment pressing down on them, their hearts thudding with an almost patriotic pride. This was not just an exchange of words, it was a clash of principles, a test of strength between power and honor, between command and loyalty. Reporters, cameras snapped furiously, each flash preserving this confrontation in history. American security agents stiffened, uncertain whether to intervene, while Russian guards shifted uneasily, their hands twitching near their coats. Yet the tomb guard stood unmoved, his figure like a sentinel carved into eternity. Putin took a step closer, his voice lowering, the interpreter almost trembling as he translated his words: "Do you know who I am?" The crowd braced for a storm. The soldier did not flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head just enough for his voice to carry, though his eyes remained locked forward in eternal vigilance. His reply was not laced with anger, nor disrespect, it was calm, resolute, and chilling in its finality. Sir, I know only that behind me rests an American soldier whose name is known but to God. My duty is to him, and him alone. Those words swept across the plaza like a wave of ice. A hush fell over the crowd, even the birds overhead seemed to pause in flight. Putin's jaw tightened, his hand lowering, his composure cracking for a fleeting instant as the reality settled in. No amount of power, no title, no threat could bend the will of a tomb guard. In that frozen moment, history itself seemed to bow to the silence of honor. The cameras kept clicking, capturing not just an image but a truth, that courage in its purest form requires no weapons, only conviction. The guard resumed his precise steps, the click of his boots echoing like a drumbeat of defiance that needed no further words. The plaza remained frozen, its silence louder than any speech, and the world would remember that on this day, one soldier's loyalty to the fallen stood taller than any throne.